This podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised. Okay, this is Drinking with Authors, the literary briefs edition. So, of course, we've all changed into our underwear. That's not accurate, but I would like it to be. Okay, I am your host. One of these days, we're going to do an underwear episode, and I'm going to be fucking thrilled. So
I love that. I love that idea.
Pajama episode.
Not fucking pajamas, underwear. It's literary briefs.
Scandalous pajamas.
Yeah, like Jen is like, I'm gonna wear my pajamas. I'm like, you're not hosting with me. I'll get one of the ho-hosts that will fucking put on underwear. Okay,
Underoos.
That would be great. I fucking love underoos.
Those are accepted. I like that.
I'm your host, Erica Lance. With me today is
J.M. Paquette.
And our guest is the alluring and enticing Leo Sparx. Oh, so adorable. So adorable.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so well, let's talk about what we're drinking while I still remember to do that. Okay,
yes.
I am finishing up my bottle of 19 Crimes Cali Red Snoop Dogg edition. So 19 Crimes is probably one of the best, like, go to the store, buy the fucking wine. It tastes amazing every time. It's like $10 a bottle. I fucking love it. So, Jen, what incredibly boring non-alcoholic drink are you doing for us today?
I have a lime bubbly.
Ooh.
And water.
Oh, gotta have a chaser for that bubbly.
Too much
alcohol. It's really fucking annoying on this show, but I love her. Okay, Leo, what are you drinking?
I am still drinking a gin and disappears in the green screen. This lime is just like overtaking everything. I have a lovely gin and tonic here with a lovely little lime.
I'm still sad that you're only on your first gin and tonic. I don't care that it's 5 p.m. there.
Hey, I know that's the thing about the West Side. It's like everybody else on the East Coast is living 3 hours in the future, and I'm like, oh, I just had breakfast. But sure, gin, let's go.
First of all, I don't think you got the spirit of this podcast. Okay,
I will get there. I should pour another one, but
you should.
This part is all the gin. I'm certain of that.
Okay,
I don't think it got a good
drink
swirl.
Some more of it so we can move on with the podcast.
You got it.
No pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I am really good at being a bad influence.
That is a trait you put on your resume because there are not enough people in this world that can do that.
Oh, yeah, no, Jen will confirm that I am really good at being a bad influence on people. Okay, so rapid fire questions. Yes. What is your favorite book of all time?
Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk, because even though it's a little problematic now since it was written in 1999, it was a depiction of a trans character in sort of a different way of being sort of, and having a lot of problems and an interesting way to solve them. And they mentioned throwing notes off of the Space Needle, and now I live in Seattle, so I love it even more.
That makes sense. What is your least favorite book of all time?
I have this thing where I just am happy that people create things, so I don't really dislike a lot of books. I'm just kind of like, you did a thing, yay! I mean, that doesn't mean I finish every single book I start, but I don't know that I have like that book that fills that slot for me where I'm like, ugh. Yeah.
So were you never, I know you talked about making school teachers very upset about cat books. Were there any books you were, so interestingly enough, I don't think in a lot of school systems, people are required, I'm going to say people instead of children, people are not required to read certain books off a certain list. Like, I know my kids were allowed to choose the fucking books they read.
Yeah.
My daughter read the Twilight series, not going to even go into that because that's the whole level right there. But were there any books you were forced to read that you were like, this is garbage?
What is that one called? Is it Treasure Island?
Robert Louis Stevenson, where he's trapped on the,
Yes. So, yeah. Is it that he starts in a ship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. So this probably has nothing to do with the quality of the work, but I remember in 9th grade, that was our assigned reading. And I was going through a lot of angst at the time, and we had to read a chapter and write our, sort of like comprehension and review of the chapter and give a summary and stuff. I kind of had this battle going on with my English teacher, mostly because I knew he was gay and he was like kind of a bitch about it. Like, it's a whole long story, but we had this like thing going on. We argued about Poe a lot, actually. He probably inspired me to love Poe as much as I did, because we used to argue about like the themes within the story. Anyway, Treasure Island, Treasure Planet. It wasn't Treasure Planet, Treasure Island. I got to this point where I got disinterested in the material, and I don't know if it was just directed at this English teacher, but I started writing reviews in this sort of like comical way. Like, I was trying to be humorous about it. So instead of actually writing what happened, I started writing my own story just to see if he would catch it. And I mean, like I said, it's probably not a reflection on the writer, but or the author. I just sort of like was like, well, it should have happened, and I rewrote the entire story. He did not like that. I will just tell you. His name was Mr. Payne too. Mr. Payne did not like that.
But at least he was reading all the work.
Yeah, he did prove to me he was reading the work, and he was like, this is not a place for you to fictionalize, this work of this is the masterpiece. And I was like, fair enough. But I think I just wasn't engaged in the source material, or with the material.
And it's interesting. I had this English teacher that had these little teeny eyebrows, like Vulcan eyebrows. He was like 5 feet tall, and he would stand on this podium. And I started in this high school, and like everybody else had been there their whole entire life. It was this little teeny town in Wisconsin. And he would look around the room and ask a question, and people would raise their hands, and then he'd go, Erica? And I'm like, what the fuck is happening right now?
Why is it me?
Yeah, I had to read so much shit I didn't like, but I did find one of my favorite books doing that. Okay.
It's weird how that happens. You need an English teacher that will challenge you. For writers, I feel like English teachers are either our favorite people in the world or our adversaries. Like, it's just
either way, it pushes you.
It does.
Jen's an English teacher.
You are somebody's worst enemy.
I know.
There's many college students who don't actually want to do their work worst enemies.
Only if you plagiarize.
Oh.
Then I get mad. Or if I read a lot of essays about cats and dogs, and I'm like, really? All the things in the world you could write about, and you pick cats and dogs?
But cats are great. I mean, yeah, it's hard. I sympathize, because I went through that phase of not reading anything that wasn't about cats. So like, I would have loved their work.
I was like, imagine, you're trying to impress someone at a party, and you walk across the room, and you're like, in your head, you're working up this big pickup line. What am I going to say? I'm going to be interesting. They're going to want to talk more. We're going to hit it off. And you're like, hey, do you know cats are different from dogs? Really? That's it. Anything in the world you could write about, because I have open essays, and I get cake versus pie papers. I'm like, really?
Oh, I love Gen Z. I do. You're teaching Gen Z, and they are amazing. They are strange, and I love it. I mean, cake versus pie is such a thing. Like
can you but have mercy on me? Like, if you wouldn't want to read it, I don't want to read it either. So,
they're like not taking it seriously enough. I understand. One day we will have entire books of personal essays about cake versus pie, cat versus dog, and why TikTok is, everything.
Well, the chicken sandwich debate, that was a big thing for a while.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm just going to throw this out here, because Four Horsemen has a teen angst book that's coming out on March 1st, where people can absolutely provide us with any teen angst, because as teenagers, and college students are just out of being their teenage years, the world is a very different place than it is when you're older. And you're like, that is the dumbest thing you could possibly say. But we have to remember, as teenagers, what it was like to be teenagers, and how, that boy that you crushed on, or that girl that you crushed on, or that person who didn't identify as either that you crushed on, was the be all end all of your existence, because they were going to be the one to give you your happily ever after, and you were 14 fucking years old.
Of course they were. It was forever. I mean, when you're 13, everything feels like forever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I agree. And then you get older, and you're like, that was 5 minutes. Like, but I don't remember your name, so I'm not going to call you later.
I feel like it's like when you're dreaming and your brain doesn't know the difference between your dreams and like being awake. It experiences all the emotions the same way. Like, I try to remember that being like a teenager it wasn't that it wasn't real. It was very real because experienced the emotions. I just wouldn't process those emotions the same way now. Like the guy I got hung up on then that I wrote a book of poetry, like terrible poetry about, and like, you know, drew all the names and the margins and the sad crying eyes and stuff like that. Now I wouldn't even talk to that person. I would never, if they hit me up on like Grindr or something, I'd be like, next. Like, we just, you know, but I had to go through that to know, like, oh no, that kind of person is not worth your time. But
no, it's true, and it's interesting to have evolutions. And you talk about, I think it's true as writers too. We have evolutions about what is important to us as a writer at that point in time and what the messages we're trying to communicate, and then later we're like, that was dumb.
But you had to do it to figure it out.
Yes, and you know that somebody who is going through that, you know, they're younger than us, but they have to, like we spoke on earlier, you know, you have to make those mistakes, and they are the people that need that writing.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's true. Okay, so what the fuck was that?
I have a question.
Then ask it. What it was that?
I feel like you were starting to say something, and I was
actually gonna ask another question, which you don't think I'm gonna do, but I was ready for it. So it's fine. Ask your fucking question.
I wanted to ask about your writing process. Like, walk us through it. How do you begin? Or do you write at night, in the morning? Do you outline? Are you a pantser, plotter? Do you listen to music?
So I keep a strange schedule that I call the second watch schedule. I don't get up until the afternoon, and I don't sleep until the sun comes up. And I believe that some of us are programmed this way, that we are not early risers. We were meant to watch The Village at night, and I cannot get up early. I'm useless. If I'm up in the morning, I'm just useless. So I write typically, you know, mostly I guess it's the night, even though it's the wee hours of the morning. And, in this time, at least, I used to write everything between work. Like, I had 3 jobs, and I would just jump in the bathtub between jobs to clean up, and I'd be like writing everything on my phone, or I'd write it at work or whatever. But now that I have a little bit more time working from home, I feel that I typically write either in the office, you know, because everything's a little bit long form now for these novellas, so I can't write it on my phone in the bathtub. You know, I would love to be in there with some lavender Epsom salt and just like, but it doesn't work when I'm trying to get out 30,000 words. So I write in here with some, you know, sort of music on, depending on the scene, and I can zone out for like hours, or I'm like sitting in the living room with my laptop and like a cat like perched on my shoulder, like, you know, there's no real in between. I'm like either in the bathtub or like cradling a cat, and like, you know, so that's pretty. But I will say, as far as plotting goes, I'm kind of in between. I plot out everything, and I feel like the characters at some point go, yeah, I see what you want to do, but we're not going to do that. We're going to go this way. And I'm like, no, you were supposed to be tied to a tree. And they're like, nah, don't want to. Like, all right, well, what do you want to do? And I'm like, you can't fuck that person. They don't know. And they're like, nah, it's happening. So I can plot out as much as I want to. And I do need a guide. It helps me a lot to know where I'm going next. Like, this is the next scene or whatever. I'll write out all the chapters and write what's supposed to happen in the chapter. And then just like delete half of it as I write.
And I think, you know, we talk about this a lot on the show, and I think this is the first time I've ever said this that I logistically remember. So, is that, you know, when we talk about plotters, there are people, Jeff Strand does what we call technical plotting. I forget the word we use, that's not it, but he follows an exact pattern for his books, and he writes that way, which is brilliant. He's fucking a brilliant writer. And I am squarely a pantser, because I don't even do what you just said. Like, if I write a list of guys that I'm writing for my erotic novel, I've won that. But otherwise, it doesn't happen. And I think that, you know, when you're talking about plotting out something, I think it helps to give you a direction. And if you get stuck, you can reference back to it to go, where was I going with this, regardless of where the characters went? Like, where do I need this to continue to go? And I think it's important, because even if you spend, for me, too much time in the outline and the plotting of the book and not actually writing the fucking book,
Yeah.
That's a problem. But I think every person needs their different guardrails for how they approach writing.
Absolutely. And I think it's also sort of a matter of knowing how long you want your chapters to be, because there's people that don't really have a bounding box on, I want my chapter to not go past 1,500 words or whatever the thing is. And so I think that pantsing sort of method is like, I'm just going to keep telling the story and we'll figure out where the chapter breaks are as we go. But if I know that I need to get from point A to point B within this many chapters and this many words, I know there's only a certain amount of things that can happen within each scene. That all said, I mean, things are going to change based on, whatever happens. You can follow a formula that will help you, successfully get to the end up until a character tells you no thanks.
And I think that's important, that every writer finds what their methodology is.
Yeah.
What works for them to progress a story forward. Because, on this show, I've gotten the very unique opportunity to talk to so many different writers, and so many new writers, and so many prolific writers. And I don't mean that they're not great. It's just, somebody who's been publishing since 1980, you know what I mean? That's a different story than somebody who's published in the last even 10 years. And talking to them and going, how do you do it? I think when people listen to the show, I really hope they go, I'm going to try something until I find what works for me.
Yeah.
So let's talk about sex scenes. I like sex scenes. Let's talk about sex scenes.
They're good ones.
Let's talk about sex. So when you first started writing sex scenes, in your previous shorter stories that you wrote and things like that, is this the first sex you've written? Hello, Snoop Dogg. Is this your first sex you've written, or was this previously a thing that you were comfortable with?
I wrote about sex, but I wrote it in the context of more like, I don't want to say the bad sex, but it was like, it was humor. It was talking about sex, but not making it sexy. It was the opposite of making it sexy. It was like, yeah, this thing happened and this is how it affected me. It was, it was, how do I make somebody laugh talking about this, and not in the, this mishap of, can't think of a terrible sexual thing that would happen, but there's things that make you laugh during sex. It wasn't that. It was, let me tell you the story of something that happens, and that is why I am the way I am now. And so those characters would have gone through these things in the past, and I would describe that sexual experience to explain it, but it was not intended to be like titillating. So I think this was my first experience trying to be like, all right, let's talk about sex in a way that's like going to get someone off. And so that was a new approach for me, but I definitely, at least in trying to publish it, I'd written erotica before in the sexy way, but none that I intended to publish with an actual storyline. So this was a little different in that way, but I definitely enjoyed it, and getting to describe the little nuances and the emotions and the different feelings, and maybe weaving in a few humorous responses as a callback to my sort of writing before. Like, I know in the first book, there's a line where it's a very tense sexual moment and somebody says, "What the fuck is a credenza?" And I just find that very funny, of like the things that, even though you're having a sexual experience and it is very real to you at the time, your mind can still go places like, oh, did I leave the stove on? That sort of a thing.
Well, and I think that's real, because, we all have moments, and we love them to be perfect, sexy moments. And when we describe them as perfect, sexy moments, but there are times you're trying to subtly take your clothes off and you trip on your jeans because you haven't gotten them off your fucking ankles yet.
Yes.
And it makes it real, and I think that's important. Did you feel like some people who write sex scenes don't feel like they completely capture the sex scenes well? How did you go about capturing the scene?
I think it's as much detail as you can put in that's not just about the sex, because sex is about all of our senses all at once. So I don't think skimping on what the room feels like, what the temperature is, what the flooring is like, because that all makes a difference. Having sex on a cement floor versus a rug in a hot room versus a cold room, the smells, the just everything is so important in writing in general, but in sex, in real life, if you are having sex in a cold cement room surrounded by, dungeon toys, that's a way different experience than getting rug burned by a fire that's burning, even if the sex is completely the same, in its sort of movement, and like, oh, we did this position and then we did that position. That could all be the same, but the feeling is not going to be the same. In a way, that environment, that atmosphere changes the sex. So I think knowing, oh, I pulled down his pants, but this is what it felt like when the fabric moved. This is, how my knees hit the pavement. That's going to make a huge difference in how you perceive that experience.
It's funny you say that, because I teach a book, and one of the chapters in it, it's about literature, and the author says when it comes to sex in novels, he's like, there's only so many positions. Like you could, there's eventually you're gonna have written every position, and what makes everything different is exactly what you just said, that the atmosphere, the experience itself is going to be, rather than the actions.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you touched earlier on talking about what the people are thinking, because I think that's huge. Just the act of, the pizza boy delivering a pizza and somehow you're fucking him on a floor. Yeah. Like whatever. But at the same time, I think being able to be in a character's head about how they're experiencing that experience. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yes, yeah.
Mine.
Again, it's English's fault, not ours.
Yes. Well, Jen's a PhD. I just have to drink and know things. I think that's important. Like when I'm writing my erotica, like a lot of it, what's interesting is I used to say chick-lit erotica. I was like, it's chick-lit erotica. It's not. It's humorous erotica, because there are some very great, intense, emotional sex scenes. And then there are some very like, what the fuck just happened? And we all have those. Like,
yeah.
Where Absolutely. We're sitting there like, what did I just experience? And there's only so many times you can say the word cock, or say the word dick, or say the word, like you have to be very comprehensive in your description of other things to not have you repeating the same action.
Right, yeah. You may be on the floor sucking a cock the same way you have several times. This character has in different chapters. But what's different? Is he looking past the guy's hips and he sees there's a picture of Donald Duck on the wall? That's a different story. That's a way different story. Now I don't know if I'm having a good time anymore.
That's weird.
Exactly.
But those moments are real. Stop kink shaming.
It was the Donald Duck. It was the Donald Duck.
Some people might be like, Donald Duck, he knows me well. Yes, I am here for this. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Do you think that when do you ever have a scene where, like, research wise, so let's talk about this, because when we're writing sex scenes, to Jen's point, there's only so many ways that parts can enter other parts, or parts can interact with other parts. You can pull out the Kama Sutra and be really creative, and then there's logistics, right? Where you're even trying to describe what's happening, and there's no way to fucking describe it, because you'd have to fucking draw a picture. And
the arm is here, the leg is there, and then this, yeah.
How do you feel when you're going into that? Have you ever had to stop? Like, I've talked to a lot of erotic writers and stuff where they go watch Pornhub, or they go do something to get like, okay, let me look at this again to how this would fucking work.
Yeah, I think that porn is great inspiration, especially since this erotica writing is a little fantastical, and porn's a little fantastical. So you can take those sort of situations that may not always happen in real life and kind of go, oh yeah, I'm going to put this certain toy or this certain apparatus that, isn't always like present in everyday sort of sexual adventures, and put that in there. But yeah, I mean, you have to draw from actual experience, as well as, whatever you can kind of, get out there in the more, adventurous, I guess, so to speak, sort of people that are putting that content out there.
So you're in a relationship.
I am.
How does I'm talking very generally.
Yes.
All of the people in this call are in varying degrees of relationships. How does your partner feel about the writing and stuff like that?
Oh, he enjoys it. He's my first beta reader. There's always sort of a test, right? If he were to read it and go, nah, this didn't really like do it for me, I'd be like, all right, it's not sexy. I gotta like write the sexy in. And I think that that's really important. Like that's the test for me. Like if he comes back and goes, yes, then I'm like, all right, I've done it. I've done, the sexy justice.
No, and I think that's important. And I think the support is important because when you are writing that, you're in a little bit of, no matter how much writing, whether you write in front of people, and no matter what you write about, you're in a little kind of private dome when you're writing.
Yes.
And you have to give it to somebody, regardless of the topic, to go, does this communicate what I'm trying to communicate? Whether it's sex, an action scene. I've seen people, like we had a writer who was talking about the fact that he puts a gun in every room in his stories, so that regardless of what fucking happens, if he needs to pull out the gun is in the room of every story.
That was Neil Gaiman talking about writing comic books. He says he puts guns in drawers for the future in case he ever needs them later on to pull out in the story. So he's like, because of the way, because he's writing serial, so it's published. He's like, I can't go back at the end of my 75 comic run series and be like, by the way, in episode 13 or issue 13, there was a gun in this drawer. So he said he just had to seed all of those. But I always think that's great, that idea that you're like seeding all these different possibilities, and then later on you can revisit.
That's great.
And you may never need that fucking gun in the drawer, but at some point you might be like, I need a fucking gun in the drawer, and the gun is in the drawer.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's setting yourself up for success. That's good.
What do you think you're not good at as a writer? And then Jen, you can ask your question. What do you think you're not good at?
I would have said, writing long form, but I also think I have this tendency that I want everything to be interesting. So if the wording of something makes more sense a certain way, I will intentionally not make it confusing, but say it in a way that is odd. And I'm doing it on purpose because a lot of the characters that I write, and Alexander's one of them, they have this sort of like not unintelligent, they're aware of the rules, but they speak in this sort of like familiar way, or this like odd, I mean, you've read the books, Jen, so you know what I'm talking about. They say something that, this is a good example. So Palahniuk talks about how a character will be speaking and they'll say something like, I did this terrible thing, and this is how I did this terrible thing. And the other character is listening to them. And when it's that character's turn to speak, instead of them saying, wow, you did this terrible thing, they go, cool. And because it's unexpected, it kind of, moves you through the story. But I worry sometimes that these choices that I make that are unexpected throw the reader off. And so I think if I have a weakness, it's that I don't make things accessible enough to every kind of reader. It's not that it takes work, but it's going to be a little, the lines maybe are going to be a little wordy, and I have been described as wordy before. And, but that's because I'm packing it in there. I'm packing it in there intentionally through this character who, even if they seem a little dumb, they're trying to show you that, no, I know the rules. I'm just not doing them.
Okay, Jen, what is your question?
That kind of leads into it. I was going to ask, like, as a writer, we all have our weird quirks. Like, all my characters nod and shrug constantly. Erica's are always realizing things. Like, what are your?
I don't realize things. I forget names now. That's my new thing.
That too. So, what would you say your like quirky issues are?
I think letting characters be in their head for a very long time, I will go chapters with like nothing happening. Like something's happening as far as these big realizations of characters are happening, but they may be just laying on a bed naked and looking at the ceiling and going, oh, wow, like I didn't realize this thing was happening. And now that I have some time to process it, all of this mystery is now like being solved, but it's all just through their thought process. So not so much that it's telling instead of showing. I'm showing this process of them realizing it, but I do keep it all sort of internal. And I think that's important because I think that's how we do realize things. But I know readers would prefer that there was like some immense like aha moment where something moves or whatever. And then you go, ah, there's the thing, instead of just like, now I'm sitting here and I'm naked and oh, that's what's going on. But it's because they finally have a breather. And, you know, I just feel like that's kind of more true to real life. But yeah, I think that maybe not making things typical. I think I try to make things very unique as much as possible. And that can be a problem because that's not a reader expectation. They don't always want it to be different. They want a version of something that they already know. So
I like that you're breaking boundaries, so I think that's important.
Yeah.
well, I appreciate that. I want to break boundaries, but not at the expense of readers feeling abandoned, that I'm not like keeping to their exact expectations.
I think your editor would disagree and say that you are keeping things to readers' expectations. So
good.
Okay, we have to wrap up literary briefs. Jen, do you have a final question? I like putting pressure on her because she just fucking froze. So that was.
No, I did. I just totally. I had one and it's totally gone.
It's that bubbly.
You're super pretty today with your bubbly fucking water. I just drank an entire bottle of wine. What is wrong with you?
We were talking about short-term memory before.
It's quarantine brain. That's what it is. We all have these ideas lodged in here.
I'm gonna let it go, and instead, okay, did you just think of it?
No, but I was gonna say you called it the pandemic more, and I think that's really funny.
I wrote that into an essay recently that I may publish. The pandemic more. I did not an original. That's from TikTok. But I do find that great.
Let's talk about, okay, we can talk about this for 1 minute and then we'll wrap up. Social media.
Yeah.
You're kind of a social media guru.
I try.
How does you think that's helped you as an author?
I think it's great because you can communicate very directly with people. As soon as they read the book, they can come straight to my Instagram or email me or whatever and tell me what they thought or what they liked, what they, you know, have questions about. And then I can be like, oh, don't worry, it's coming. You know, there's a third book and it will answer all those questions. And I think it is great to interact with those fans and to continuously like be putting out things related to your book or just related to things that you like, so they get an idea of who you are and what they can expect from you going forward. You know, you don't want your readers to feel kind of abandoned. I want a certain amount of mystery, right, around like me as a writer, but for the most part, I'd rather just, you know, talk to people and share my sexy pictures. Not of me, of other men, but still.
I'm not going to mention the sexy pictures of you. They should exist, but whatever. We'll eventually get to that.
Hey, if you're not naked on the internet somewhere, have you even lived?
No, I don't think you have. As somebody, good luck with everybody trying to find it. It exists out there. Yes. Challenge accepted. Okay. This has been amazing. Tell people where to find you.
You can find me at leosparx.com, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at author Leo Sparx. I'm sure there are other places. Oh, I did join TikTok. I got to, I love observing, but I got to get better at making videos on there. But you can also find me at author Leo Sparx on TikTok. I believe that is it. I'm sure there's other places. I'm sure I'm on Pornhub. Who knows? You know, look around. You'll find me.
I'm just saying, investigate the interwebs for it.
OnlyFans.
Absolutely sign up for his newsletter. You get a free Becoming Alexander. So you get the free titillating start to the series. And very shortly we will have Murder at the Dude Morgue, the next series, in the amazing Leo Sparx. So we're super excited about that. Thank you for coming on the show. You've been thoroughly amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I'm going to say titillating. I don't get to say that about guests often, but titillating.
Yay.
Okay. So I've been Erica Lance.
J.M. Paquette.
And we will fucking see you next time.